Hi, I just wanted to come on and make a little video about the passing of dear David Wilcock. Just make a little video about that. So it's really sad that we've lost David, and it's only been a few days, and already, of course, there's an uproar online, a lot of opinions coming out, and to my sadness, not all of them very kind. A couple of very offhand channels who've dealt with this a little bit roughly, a little bit patronising as well. You know, David was a human, like we all are. He had his flaws, like we all do. But he was still a brilliant mind, still a brilliant man, and a very loving, caring individual as well. And it's a bit easy perhaps to get a bit lost in the noise of it all at the moment, in the speculation and various different narratives at play. But one of the things that David did that was amazing was that he got us to come back into our hearts. You know, he was a passionate advocate for the idea that we're all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively, and that the source of everything is just love. And all of this noise, all of this chatter, all of these opinions jostling for attention, the bottom line is that we are all eternal beings. We are all born from love, from loving energy, loving source. And we're just having this temporary human experience, that's all. And the powers that be on our planet, well, we know that there's a hell of a lot of darkness. The Epstein files sadly showed us that. The good news about that is we're starting to wake up to it, because we can't change what we refuse to look at or what we can't see. So there's been this darkness on this planet for the longest time, I believe. And we're starting to wake up to it. Some people had woken up to it already. Some people had woken up to it in part. I think the Epstein files help us all wake up to it a great deal more. And David was a passionate, outspoken advocate for spirituality. He was a real character. He was fun. He brought a lot of life, a lot of joy into the whole thing, you know, and he was incredibly, fantastically clever at the same time, had a brilliant mind. And people are losing sight of all of that. Some people have been quite quick to judge and things like this. He's human. He's simply human. But he did a lot of good. And he achieved an awful lot. You know, he wrote 4 New York Times bestsellers. He wrote and co-authored another 4 books. He was phenomenal in his output of work, his videos, his research into sort of the intersection between the paranormal, UFOs, spirituality and science, consciousness. Phenomenal mind. And a very loving person. And so that's kind of the bottom line, is let's just remember the man that he was, the brilliance of that human. You know, he had his flaws, he had his problems, as we all do. And I'm just very sorry if he was experiencing so much difficulty in his sort of last few years, you know. But he did an awful lot, and he didn't have to, did he? He didn't have to do any of that. He could have just lived a lovely, quiet life away from the limelight, you know, just chilled out, relaxed. He didn't have to put himself out there for all of us, but he did. You know, he really did. He was really passionate about that. You know, I used to watch quite a lot of his videos when I was younger. But he never sort of purported to be any sort of guru or anything like that. He was, you know, just human, but a fantastic human but flawed as we all are. And so I think it's just nice, isn't it, when someone's just passed, to simply remember the good that they've brought into the world. You know, when people pass, it's a time to grieve their memories, if you were close to them, if they meant something to you. And it's a time to celebrate who they were as well and what they brought to this world, and to think about that, not to immediately pounce on perceived flaws or anything like that. You know, there's a time and a place to perhaps look at someone's life with a very balanced view, but you don't have to drop kindness or diplomacy in order to try to be authentic, you know? Kindness is everything. We have to remember the good that he brought, and he did bring a lot of good. And to consider otherwise is perhaps to do a massive disservice to his memory. And if we take one thing from all of this, it's that we must enact that love. We must bring that love into everything that we do, you know? The powers that be on this planet, well, as I say, there's a lot of darkness. And I think they'd love nothing more than us to continue existing in very chaotic spaces, in ways that are very sort of low vibrational, in darkness, unkindness, arguing, anger, chaos, being divorced from our heart spaces. The whole way society is set up is to try to divorce us from our hearts, to try to devalue emotion and separate us from emotion and give great primacy to our minds. But the mind without heart is nothing. It's dangerous. It can go into very cold, terrifying territory, you know? And we can see that evidenced in so many ways. When you hear people talk about animals as product, for example, animals are not product. They're beautiful, sentient beings with very complex emotions and an awful lot of love and kindness and joy. And we do a great disservice to them if we don't see that. And we see, again, some of the so-called elites on our planet when they talk about humans in such callous terms. You know, you think about the Epstein files and how, was it Bill Gates and Epstein who were just casually having a conversation one day on email about how to, you know, they were looking at ways to get rid of the poor people, you know? I mean, that's horrific in its callousness. And yet there they were discussing it. People in higher places don't get there through kindness, but kindness is the ultimate thing that we have to carry us through this life. The most important thing is love and kindness and empathy and care and compassion and decency and all of that. And I'm reminded of this again when, only today I was reading a little article online which said that a senior person, a senior civil servant here in the UK, said something very callous indeed when looking at what had happened to the lady who sadly died in the Novichok poisoning case in Salisbury. And this senior official board just said, they were just glad that it was only a drug addict or something like that. It's the most horrific thing to say. Oh, good job it was only, you know, a drug addict, something like that. And it's like, what? Do you know? It's terrifyingly easy for humans to devalue other life, whether it's human or animal, and to categorize people And the people at the top seem to do this with frightening ease. And part of the reason is because they're all completely divorced from their heart chakras, from their hearts, you know. And sometimes that's because they're literal psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, etc. And they have very low to no emotional empathy. And the other reason is simply that they've sort of entrained themselves to be so callous. You don't get high up on the ladder through feeling your feelings and being emotional and being kind. And that's why this world is inverted in so many ways. You know, one of the ways is literally that all the people at the top, the people who rule us, are not the people who should be ruling over us. Because they haven't got a clue how kindness works. They haven't got a clue about empathy, about all of the things that matter. Whenever, you know, when we die, God isn't going to give a shit how many cars you got or how many billions you amassed. God is just going to care about who we've helped. How have we spread a little light in the world, a little bit of love, a little bit of kindness and all of that. And we're all flawed. We're all human after all. But we have to do our best. We're not always going to do it. You know, some days we might be quite grumpy. Some days we might fall over. We might make mistakes. You know, we're human after all. But we have to come back to that love. And it's really important that we do it now in these times. I believe we're all leveling up spiritually anyway. I believe that's the way this planet is going and we're going. We're coming into greater love. We're coming into greater spiritual awareness. And since we are spiritual beings having this human experience, that's a kind of remembering. We're just remembering who we are. That we're much more powerful than the powers that be would like us to think. Because if we all woke up tomorrow and went, hey, we're an eternal being, connected to God at all times, connected to infinite wisdom and infinite love, and we're just here having this temporary human experience, well, it would change things. People would feel so held and supported by spirit that there would be very little, if any, addiction. There would be very little frenzied consumerism, because people often feel the need to keep buying goods for just cheap dopamine hits or what have you, but they're trying to fill a void and they don't even know what the void is, and it's a spiritual void in some cases. You know, we have been deliberately kept in the dark, in my opinion, as to who we really are, the base nature of humanity. Who we are as beings in the world. We are more than this physical presence, this material presence. It's part of who we are, but it isn't the whole story, you know. And David helped spread that message. He helped spread that message. And so I think if we can just, you know, take a moment and just remember him for that. It's another sad loss. There's been an awful lot of losses lately. And he will be remembered well, hopefully, by the majority of people, you know. And regardless of whatever speculation you have, coming back to our heart space and all of that is so important. And it would be nice, actually, if someone were to remember his passing by organising a mass meditation or something like that, you know. I think that would be a fitting way to remember him. Anything that brings us back to that love, brings us back to that awareness. So yeah, just my thoughts for tonight. Rest in peace, David, you know, journey well. Thank you, David, for all that you have brought to us, you know, for all that you have shown us and for all the work that you've done. You know, that's really special. It's a really beautiful thing. These are quite dark times we're living in, or very dark times we're living in. But we can make it through. You know, we have many tools at our disposal. to make it back to the light, to come back to the light. But one of the ways that we do this is simply by remembering who we are. Remembering our spirituality is a huge part of waking up and empowering ourselves to live a more meaningful, deeper, wilder, more beautiful, more joyful, more purposeful existence. You know? And I think David helped in that regard. I think he helped a lot of people to start remembering who they are. And that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. If you're watching this, I hope you're well. I hope you're doing okay. In these weird, mad, chaotic times, just remember to breathe, walk out in nature. You know, it's very often when we're bombarded with news stories, our circuitry gets completely overloaded. But all you need to do is switch your phone off for half an hour, walk out in nature, unplug from everything. When you get home from work, etc., or at a weekend, unplug from everything. And you come back to being a bit more grounded. You come back to your senses, to your heart, to your body, to your life. We are being hijacked like never before with horrific news stories, but just, you know, with all these frequencies, with mobile phones, our attentions being pulled hither and thither. Just coming back to ourselves, spending a few moments coming back to ourselves, going out in nature. Again, these are quite empowering things to do. And I think it's really important. So I hope you're doing that. I hope you're getting rest. I hope you are realising that there is magic and beauty in this world, gently overlaid onto this world. And when we start stepping into our spiritual awareness, we start realising we're getting guidance from something. That the universe is there, softly whispering to us. But usually you're so frenetic, you're so busy, you're so in your minds that you're not seeing it. But when you step into your heart a bit more, you purposefully step forward in a bit of a spiritual quest, well, then the magic starts to happen. When you start to step into whatever it is that you're meant to be doing, your purpose here on planet Earth. Your purpose isn't necessarily your day job, but your purpose, what you're here to do. You start seeing magical synchronicities and things like this and realise that your life is divinely led and guided. And when you start to step into your spiritual path, likewise, you start to realise you're never alone. You've got spirit guides. You've got beings that love you always, and you're never, ever alone, you know. So these are so important to remember this. And yeah, these are dark times, so we need to remember this more than ever, you know. But we're going to, I believe we're going to, because I think we're being leveled up spiritually, collectively anyway. So yeah. Take care. God bless. Bye.